The cost of housing, particularly in the Greater Toronto Area, is one of our most persistent problems. Governments have employed a lot of strategies to get the prices down, and yet they remain stubbornly high. The city of Vaughan in York Region recently announced a new approach, and the city's mayor, Stephen Del Duca, joins us here in the studio for more. Great to see you again.
It's great to be back. Thank you.
We were reminiscing not a moment ago before we started about how you so enjoyed the last time you were in this studio.
It's been more than 2 years. Provincial leaders debate right here in this great studio, but it is very nice to be back talking about all things of Vaughan, which I'm very happy to talk about today.
Good. Let's get started. As you looked around this part of Ontario, where did Vaughan sit in terms of the average price of a home?
Pretty high. You know, I mean, I can't tell you exactly where it's stacked up against every other municipality, but we did some research last summer, summer of 2024, that showed us the median price of a home, roughly the average price of a home in the city of Vaughan would be about $1.2, $1.3 million. And when you factor in what it would take by way of an average income to carry that kind of cost, fairly significant, far more than the average income. So a bit of a mismatch, a gap there. That's one of the reasons that we took decisive action in the city of Vaughan to try to deal with it.
How much of that $1.3 million average price would be represented by so-called development charges?
Well, at that point in time, the city of Vaughan portion was, for let's say a single detached home, city of Vaughan portion was $94,000, give or take. York Region, about, I want to say 85 to 90,000, and then the school boards, several thousand more on top of that. So before you put a shovel in the ground, somebody building a home for one of my constituents would have to pay upwards of $200,000+ to various levels of government just to get the project permitted.
And just for those who aren't completely familiar with what development charges are, tell us what they are.
Development charges are, I'll call them levies that municipalities charge. Normally when an applicant or a builder comes for a building permit, they have to pay this cost, and it's what we use in turn to pay for a lot of really important infrastructure. I want to make that clear. Development charges do help fund things like fire stations, libraries, roads, water, wastewater systems, so that, you know, you move into a home, the toilets will literally flush and the showers will work.
It's always a good thing.
Always really important things. So development charges are necessary to fund the infrastructure that maintain the quality of life. I just know that in my city, like many other municipalities, they have risen sharply over the last number of years. And given that we do have a housing affordability crisis, I felt that we had to do something. And so we did.
So one of the things you asked your city staff to do in Vaughan was to look at what might happen if you reduce those charges.
Yeah.
What came back?
Well, what came back is that, I will tell you that what came back, of course, is always the concern that if you start to cut anticipated revenues, that you might have a bit of a challenge, I'll say, on the back end. The problem is the last couple of years in our city, and I suspect it's true in most GTA municipalities, there hasn't been a ton of new housing starting. And so one of the reasons that I was quite comfortable making this change is I told myself and I told my colleagues on council, I would much rather that we get half of something than 100% of nothing. And that was kind of the guiding philosophy, again, especially when you consider that so many people, in particular young families that are just starting out, are telling all of us in leadership positions, it's not okay that housing has become so unattainable and so expensive in the neighborhoods where they grew up. And that's what I'm trying to work on.
So if the average development charge was, for the average house, let's say almost $100,000,
yeah.
What are you doing in Vaughan now on that?
So again, for that $94,000 for a low rise, like a traditional single detached home, we took it from $94,000 down to about $50,000. So we basically cut it in half.
And that kicks in as of when?
It's already kicked in. We passed the bylaw in late 2024, and so it's in effect for now.
And will last for how long?
So technically, the way that we positioned it, it's a 2-year window, although, not to go too much into the weeds here, although through the DC Act, the Development Charge Act, you can get into an agreement that helps extend the runway beyond the 2-year mark. At the same time, development charge rates get set when municipalities do, I'm gonna get a bit policy wonkish here, they do something called a DC background study, then they introduce and pass a new bylaw. We weren't planning to do that work until next year, 2026, 2027. We've accelerated our timeline and we're starting that work in Vaughan this year, right now in 2025. So I want it updated across the board so we don't have to rely on a bit of a hodgepodge of policies in this regard.
What do you hope this will do?
Well, two main things. One is because even though I said a moment ago development charges are important and they are necessary, I do think, especially in our case, and we're not the only municipality in this regard, I do think that they are, in effect, a tax that does get passed on to home buyers. And again, I want to stress in particular younger families that are just starting out. Those are the ones that I feel, I'll say, a particular degree of anguish for. You know, I'm a dad. My daughters are 17 and 13. I always kind of frame these conversations around what do my wife and I hope for them. We tried our best to give them every single opportunity, and I don't know. Maybe my daughters will get married one day. Maybe they won't. I mean, I hope they do. Maybe they'll want to live close to home. Maybe they won't. What I believe is really important is for us to give them all of the options and opportunities that we had, that my wife had, that I had. And it feels to me like that's no longer the case. So I'm hoping, number one, the price of housing will come down because we're sending a clear market signal that it's cheaper to build. Secondly, I'm hoping we'll spur more activity, so more builder developers will get shovels in the ground, which will help with the supply challenge, and I hope, again, bring prices down.
How long will it take before you know whether that's actually going to happen?
Well, I've already had conversations with significant builders and developers who operate in Vaughan. They operate in York Region. First of all, they're thrilled that we are taking this seriously because they're telling me that anytime they go to a bank or any kind of lending institution to get the financing for their project, there's literally a line item in what they're submitting to their lenders that shows what government regulations and fees like development charges cost them. So we know it's an added cost to the project. So they're happy to know that we're working really hard to bring those costs down for them so they can pass those on to the buyers themselves. I suspect we're going to start to see prices drop and activity spurred on. I'm hoping early in 2025, but this is one of those things you analyze after the fact. It's kind of hard to know real time. I can only tell you anecdotally it's gone over really, really well.
I take your point that you'd rather have 50% of something as opposed to 100% of nothing if nothing is getting built. But if this does not work as well as you hoped, you will be foregoing revenue for the Treasury, presumably. Has staff come back to you with an estimate of how much this actually could end up costing you in the end, and therefore you won't have the money for those fire halls or for those municipal pools, et cetera?
So again, hard to know in the moment because it is all based on activity and how much construction is starting, how many building permits will be getting applied for and then ultimately approved. But the other thing I didn't mention is that when we did our last development charge background study in Vaughan, which was in 2022, we notionally, in that plan, in that bylaw, we put together what we anticipated the revenue would be from development charges annually. When we did that work, we anticipated about $230, $240 million a year, give or take. What we've actually achieved, what we've actually brought in the last couple of years has been dramatically less than that. So I think when it comes to the 10-year capital plans that underpin things like development charge background studies and ultimately inform what the rates should be, there's already an awful lot of agility and nimbleness that municipal staff have to bring to bear. I am absolutely convinced that this will lead to more activity than we would have gotten in the city of Vaughan otherwise, which means to me more revenue. But even if we have to make decisions later on about the things that are fundamentally necessary for our residents, governing is about choices. It's about choosing. You know this. And for me, in terms of the policy levers at my disposal as mayor, if we're going to make housing more affordable, like if we truly believe housing affordability is a problem right now, if we believe it means that a lot of kids are thinking of moving away from the GTA, maybe even leaving Ontario, if we think it's having an impact on whether they're choosing to start families when otherwise they would make that choice, to me, there's a responsibility that every level of government has to actually marshal the forces and make the policy changes to fix the problem. So that's what we're doing in Vaughan.
I should know this, and I don't know this, and I'm embarrassed that I don't know this. But you will know this, and you're going to help me.
Well, I hope so.
Are municipalities on the same fiscal year as the province of Ontario, meaning it kicks in April 1st?
We are on. That's a great question, and I should know that, and I believe yes, we are. So if I'm wrong about that, I'm sure my budget officer will tell me that as soon as I
think that's the case, and if it is so, then you guys are in the throes right now of obviously trying to put your budget together because you're bringing it out in just a few months' time. Do you know yet what...
Well, let me go back and correct myself. We approved our budget for 2025 in December in the city of Vaughan.
Oh, okay.
So we did, yeah.
So you're there already?
Yeah.
Do you have any idea about what mill rates and or property taxes are going to have to go up to handle next year?
So we approved a budget for 2025 that would see an increase of 3% at the local level in the city of Vaughan, which is the second lowest in all of York Region. And I believe that our fiscal outlook for 2026 has us at about the same rate. We anticipate that for 2026 budget 20, but we haven't done budget 26 just yet.
Right. I guess what I'm getting at is if you end up discovering that this development charge move that you've done doesn't result in more income coming in and in fact is going to end up costing you, you will have to presumably raise property taxes in order to make up the shortfall, yes?
I don't actually think so, because it goes back to what I said just a moment ago. We've actually brought in less by way of development charges the last 2-3 years because there's been less housing activity happening in the city of Vaughan. So remember, we created a background study, we had a new rate, I think it was 21 or 2022. We anticipated 230, 240 million a year coming in from that. It's been dramatically less than that already. Our capital plan is still in place as we put it together a couple of years ago, but we've made choices and we're fortunate. We have a strong local economy in the city of Vaughan. Our revenues have been such that we've been able to keep investing in those things that our residents want to see. But I cannot tell you how many moms and dads and grandmothers and grandfathers tell me on a regular basis, where will our kids live? How are we going to afford? How are they going to afford a quality of life and a life for them that is anywhere close to what we had? And I don't like not having an answer for those residents of mine that feel that passionately that we are not passing on to our kids and grandkids a situation that is tolerable from my perspective, and I think that's a real problem.
There are 444 municipalities in Ontario.
There are.
Are any others doing this? The development charge cuts that you've implemented?
City of Burlington did this, I'll say on a smaller scale, a little bit of time ago, several months ago. And I have heard City of Toronto's done some targeted stuff. I don't know of any other municipality that's done an across-the-board change on this scale so far. I have urged my colleagues publicly to consider doing the same. I don't know that urging makes me the most popular mayor amongst his colleagues, but I do think it's really, really important for us to accept the responsibility we have. And, I know, Steve, you know this about me. I always come back to talking about my daughters, and I will just repeat kind of what I said a moment ago. We have to remember, I'm 51. I'm in that cohort of people who've created the system that we are all living in right now. And I don't want to be in a world where many, many years from now, I'm having conversations with my kids and maybe one day my grandkids, and they're all kind of wondering about, Dad or Granddad, when you had that chance to make a meaningful difference, to make things a little bit easier, to make things a little bit affordable, did you step up and do it? Or did you simply point fingers at other levels of government or other politicians or the Bank of Canada or Donald Trump or someone? Like, did you do that, or did you actually take the obligation you have and run with it? And so I believe we have that obligation. That's why I've made this decision. Council supported it. And I'm hoping that it will work, and I'm hoping more municipalities take it really seriously.
If they do, Vaughan will be less special. Do you worry about that?
Vaughan will always be extremely special and unique. It's the best city in Canada, for sure.
Your daughters are 17 and 13, and already in our conversation, you've talked about them being married off and having grandchildren. You might want to just pump the brakes a little bit on that, Your Worship.
I said they may choose to get married, they may not. It's their choice. But I will tell you, I do feel that I have an obligation to set the table for them and all of the others like them to the extent that it's possible.
Okay, I want to take advantage of your being here to raise another issue here.
I knew I couldn't escape completely.
No, that's not going to happen. As we pointed out, you were here a couple of years ago. You were the Liberal leader in the Ontario general election that took place that year. You took part in a leaders' debate here. Doug Ford rather famously won that election, and you did not. And fortunately for you, the good burghers of Vaughan decided to make you their mayor just a few months later, so it kind of worked out for you. If I had told you when you were in this studio doing the leaders' debate that you and Doug Ford, who you absolutely slayed in that debate, you were so tough on him in that debate, that you guys would go on to become pretty good working buddies, would you have believed me?
I would have been surprised. I think it's fair to say. I think it's
just
fair
surprised,
to say. Surprised. I think that, but listen, I really enjoy being mayor of my city. It's where I've lived for close to 40 years. And I think it's a great city. It's not without its challenges, but it's a great city. And when I made the decision in the summer of 2022 that I was going to seek the mayoralty, which wasn't an easy decision for me to make. I mean, we just come off a pretty tough election loss provincially, as you pointed out. Thank you for the reminder. I made that decision based on a couple of things really important to me personally. I wasn't running for mayor to try to settle old political scores. That made no sense to me, and that kind of, I'll say, negative energy or negative approach is not something that motivates me. So I wanted to do a good job for the people of the city of Vaughan, number one. Number two, it was really important to me to recognize that I was entering a new and what I'll call post-partisan phase of my career. I had been active in the Liberal Party since I was 15 years of age, and as much as I really do feel like I made a contribution to the party, I am feeling very liberated by being in that post-partisan phase.
Do you not carry a party card anymore?
I don't. I believe my party membership provincially and federally has lapsed. Yes, both. And it was also important for me to recognize my job now, my responsibility to the people of Vaughan is to work with every politician at every level, regardless of partisan stripe, to deliver for them. And I think anybody looking at my record now these last 2 and a bit years, objectively would tell you that I've done that. And part of that means working closely with Premier Ford.
Well, let me get your take on that, because, of course, the mayor of Brampton is a former PC party leader. The mayor of Hamilton is a former NDP leader. Mayor of Vaughan is a former Liberal leader.
Yeah, there's a lot of us.
You know, Marianne Mead Ward in Burlington was a one-time Liberal candidate. So is it genuinely the fact that once you turn your back on partisan politics and take on these new roles in municipal affairs, that party stripe stuff really does stay at the door?
I think it seems like it's true to me. I think that's the way it should be. I will tell you, if I'm being really, really transparent about this, I think those first few months after I became mayor, there was a healthy dose of skepticism and concern in the city of Vaughan about whether I could leave the partisanship at the door. I think people were nervous about that because they recognized you need to have that good working relationship, certainly with Queen's Park if you're a mayor of a major city. But again, I think objectively I've proven to the people of Vaughan that to me this is about them, not about settling old scores, not about partisan politics. And I feel liberated by it because it means that I can make decisions based on my personal values and not necessarily getting stuck in what you need to manage when you are leading a political party that has diverse views.
Well, when the Premier visited Vaughan to do a little photo op with you, a little press conference, he always likes to have fun, sometimes at your expense.
He does, yeah.
We happen to have a little clip of that right here. Sheldon, if you would, please.
But the mayor and I got together shortly after the provincial election, and I'm not blowing smoke here, Mayor. I told you, one of the best guys to deal with out of all the mayors I've ever worked with. He just believes in getting it done. He believes in supporting the people of Vaughan, and that's where we share the same philosophies. And it's great to see you again, Mayor, and you got to come over for breakfast pretty soon one more time. Have you ever seen Stephen and I at a box of Tim Horton donuts? They're done, I'll tell you.
He's said on many occasions that you've come over to his home in Etobicoke, crushed a box of cannolis, I think is the way he puts it.
He does put it that way.
Yeah, this really happens.
I have had the chance to meet directly with the Premier at his home. I'm not the only one who certainly has. You know what I'll say about Doug Ford, and I've said this publicly before, including I think that day when we made that he made that announcement. He is the most accessible senior political leader that I have ever encountered, that I've ever seen. Again, regardless of level of government or partisan stripe, this story that he tells about call or text, and he gives out a cell number, it's not fake. It is genuine. He is extremely accessible. It doesn't mean we agree on every single issue, but he's been very, very kind to me and to the people of Vaughan over the last couple of years. And I believe he genuinely does want to get things done, and that's certainly my motivator as well.
If you were advising him,
cannolis and donuts, well, I mean, you know, we both enjoy our sweets. We both enjoy our sweets.
If you had to advise him on whether to call an election this year as opposed to waiting for 2026, what would you tell him?
I would tell him I'm really happy that that's not my decision to make. These are tumultuous times in our country, and I think what people want to see is very strong and stable leadership. I think that there's grave concern, understandably, given what's happening in Ottawa right now as we're heading into the second Donald Trump presidency and the tariff threat. I think there's grave concern. Even in Vaughan's case, our economy is largely underpinned by manufacturing and auto manufacturing. It's a big concern for all of us. I think we want to see strong leadership. And I never think it's a bad thing to have a conversation, as others have said, with the people that you are trying to represent, especially during unprecedented times. But you also have to be a little bit careful. So, yeah. But I'm glad it's not my decision.
Dalton McGuinty once said the best advice he ever got in politics was on a sign on the steps going into Queen's Park, and that sign said, "Watch your step." Right on. That's Stephen Del Duca. He's the mayor of Vaughan, and we thank him for making the long drive into the center of Toronto today for this interview. Thanks so much.
Thank you.